In the last year, the U.S. intelligence community and the DoD together had $106 billion appropriated funds for intelligence exposing the scale of data and infrastructure programs across IC and the DoD. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead for the AppDev practice at the Cube Research, and I'm joined by Cameron. Cameron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad to have you on. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about MinIO?
Sure. So, Paul, I come to MinIO humbly through being an operator. I've had the great fortune throughout my career to help build the world's first cloud computing company, a little company called US Center Networking in Annapolis. I've also had the great fortune to help build the eastern seaboard of the internet, an asset called DigX. Been a CTO for a good portion of my career, both at Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics. Spent some time at Dell as an executive and a CTO there, and most recently was the VP leading the global government business for Intel. What brought me to MinIO was the striking technology that this company has built, really transforming how we store, manage, process, and analyze data in this era of being AI-driven. So I came to MinIO, which is truly the first native object store company out there, making things happen in this space, really at exascale. So I'm excited for our conversation, Paul.
Cameron, I'm really happy to have you on today. I mean, there's really so much going on in this space. I'm kind of excited because I don't really get to talk a lot about, the federal government or DoD kind of pieces that kind of apply to the tech stacks. But it's really exciting to me because market trends in the US, especially around federal and data and infrastructure programs, particularly with the DoD and intelligence community, are really increasingly shaped by the needs of real-time and mission-critical insights, right? We're seeing this across our research. We're seeing this across agencies accelerating adoption for cloud modernization, zero trust architectures. And now with Cameron, with AI-enabled analytics, it really is helping to handle that massive volume of structured and unstructured data, right? When we look at multi-domain operations, joint all-domain command and control and data fabric initiatives, it's really starting to drive those investments in secure operational infrastructure, right? And the push for commercial cloud services, often delivered in either hybrid approaches or multi-cloud models, is reshaping how procurement strategies are emphasizing the scalability, resiliency, and speed to the mission itself. So again, a lot of it's really exciting to me, and a lot has to do with truly life and death situations, if you think about it. But at the same time, there's a significant challenge that persists here, Cameron. Legacy systems, as you know, in government, they're old, and some of them have to be kind of bridging the gap between the heritage and new. But those system integrations have stringent compliance requirements and growing cyber threats that really complicates that modernization efforts. So ensuring data sovereignty really minimizes that vendor lock-in or balance classified and unclassified workloads. It remains to be an ongoing concern for a lot of organizations. So let's jump right into some of the kind of areas that we were talking about in our briefing, we were talking about in our conversations. And I'd love to get your thoughts on a couple of things. One, we see that the governance now has a lot of focus, right? The White House has initiated or instituted national security AI memorandums, right? And this is just as in October of 2024. We see that there's the DoD formalizing the CDAO and the government chief AI officers, right, as part of the centralizing of authority for AI data adoption. These are like changes that are new that are happening. What are your thoughts around this?
Paul, it's a great opening salvo for a lot of reasons. At one point, tech and government was considered the quintessential tip of the spear for all of the technology industry. It was the most advanced. And then over time, people kind of looked at the government as slow moving and lethargic, which really isn't the case. It's the highly regulated operational environment, which you alluded to in your opening salvo, that makes this more complicated because you want to always apply technology for good, right? You want it for the betterment of United States citizens, people around the world, mission users, civil servants that are always trying to do the right thing, delivering these services for the good and the betterment of society. But you're right, governance, it's really starting to get some teeth because people are realizing that as technology advances, these are all just new tools, but they are a reflection of society on how people apply the tools. So governance is really important, especially when you talk about AI. You have to leverage AI with proper safeguards. I think you may arguably agree we're living in a very interesting time with misinformation, information. Imagine that being exacerbated, with automation using AI, which we don't have to let our imaginations go too far. So it's good to see that we're taking a practical, pragmatic, risk managed approach to this. But let's be clear, the government's moving rather quickly, which is refreshing on its adoption and use with real smart AI simply to enhance the advancement of the mission capability, whether it be kinetic operations or simply providing better decision advantage for people either at the POTUS level, the policy level between the House and the Senate, or just at the tactical level of people implementing this day to day pragmatically to help advance the mission speed. That's what it's about.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to try to simplify what we just talked about here, just for the audience. Kind of the takeaway in my mind is AI efforts really must show traceable governance. That's use and limits, that's bias, privacy mitigation, it's oversights, and it needs to map to, in this case, we're talking about the IC and the DoD policies and the HEO packages around the programs and baselines. It's really important, right? Because this isn't just applying to government. This is applying to any organization, right? So those governance and traceable governance around AI is really incredibly important. So Cameron, switching a little bit, when we start, looking at these projects and we're looking at the pilots to program, where the programs are going. And when you're looking at securing Gen AI at scale, let's talk a little bit about the DoD Task Force Lima that's really found a widespread Gen AI opportunity, but called out blockers, right? Such as compute access, streamlined ATOs, and involving policy. What are your thoughts around what this means with regards to taking these pilots? We were talking about the government moving fast, taking these pilots and taking them to the next level. I do want to add one little piece that this recent MIT study that came out indicated that I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but a large percentage of AI, specifically Gen AI projects, just fail. Just don't come to fruition. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's a great call out, and the MIT study is absolutely apropos and correct. What I love about these pilots and I love about these projects, we all have heard the saying before, fail fast and learn quick. I applaud the government for what it's doing here because typically, Paul, you and I know the government doesn't want to make investments at times because they want to be extraordinarily frugal and responsible with taxpayer dollars. In this instance, because of how fast the technology is moving for agentic AI and just AI in general, I think it's important we take a completely different strategy here. The pilots help us learn fast. The failures from pilots help us learn fast. The successes from pilots help us learn fast. So this is all in the spirit of helping us responsibly and intelligently implement these types of solutions, but from a position of knowledge, right? Rather than hypothesis or speculation. And I think that's the key difference here. And I think the government should be applauded because, as you know, Paul, the government's not the only highly regulated industry out there. Everything in the U.S. is regulated. So the lessons learned are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, to your point here, we can apply this across whether it's healthcare with HIPAA or financial services. But I think we need to expect more enterprise Gen AI enclaves, standardizing evaluation playbooks, and really portfolio transitions. In the case of what we're talking about here, in the pilot to IATT to production ATOs, right? Because it really helps with establishing where languages and workflow automation drive the tempo, right? Drive the acceleration of how these things happen. So I'm really excited about that piece of it. I agree with you. I mean, the days of submitting a help desk ticket and waiting 3 days for something to respond, that's long since gone, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see the government is actually getting on board with rapid innovation because that's really important. Speaking of that, we talk about rapid innovation. We talk about air-gapped environments. We talk about cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid clouds across all classifications, right? And that includes the edge. There's a lot of challenges here, whether you're thinking about classified or unclassified, secret or top secret levels that really require, edge or different types of operations. And, using tech stacks like, AWS Snowball or Outpost or Azure Stack or Roving Edge or whatever it may be, these are areas that are challenges, not just for the government, but in this specific example, when you have data that is, certainly classified or top secret or secret, and needs to be protected a certain way. What does this mean from a storage perspective, right? When we're looking at the portability of this information, but also the security of this information, what does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So when we really look at this, Paul, and it boils down to storage is no longer a commodity, but a strategic asset. And you have to look at it that way because let's all be super clear. The data explosion is happening at the tactical edge, as you very astutely called out. And it's less about an enterprise per se coming into the four walls of a data center or even to the virtual private data center I put into a cloud environment. And it's now about how do I deal with this federated architecture that has rapidly emerged? How do I deal with security, the analytics at the edge? And then more importantly, the boom that's happening with the smart devices. I mean, you called out a couple. JWCC is great. This is why sovereign and hybrid cloud and understanding those control and secure boundaries becomes critical. Give you a great example. Most people will log into ChatGPT or whatever their favorite AI prompt is of choice. When you put in your prompt, where is that data being cached and stored, right? Even just your prompt engineering at times can either be controlled or unclassified information. What you're putting in could be classified information, or if you're just a normal regulated business, if it's HIPAA, high tech with healthcare, PCI DSS with financial services, people are going to have to start to rapidly look at this sovereign hybrid multi-cloud model because of the exact issue you mentioned regarding security.
Yeah, agreed. And and we think about the security, we think about the context of governance and control, architecting for portability for data and models across domains and classifications matter. We also mentioned the tactical edge caching processing, right? That has to be kind of taken into consideration. As what I'm finding in our research is in the next 2 years, we're seeing that an explosion of applications being developed, 500 to 1,000 net new AI workloads happening at the edge. That means that cross-domain data flows and policy taggings really becomes table stakes at this point. We need to make sure that we're protecting this. This is a new model. It's happening very fast. And because it's happening very fast, that also means that mistakes can happen very fast. So it has to be protected. And that also comes down to thinking about building sovereign clouds with zero trust plus AI security. It really does, in my mind, Cameron, I think at this point, it really does become a baseline. And when we look at, what's happening in the DoD and, standing up zero trust portfolio management office and zero trust officers to drive the ZT target list by 2027, I believe. I may be mistaken, but I think that's right. By 2027, if that's the case, that means that there has to be new ways to thinking about these controls. Am I on point here, or is this a little bit off?
No, you're 100%. I mean, Paul, it's the whole reason we start with zero trust principles in the software stack that we build. Our own key management systems, the way we do encryption, the way we do identity and access management, it's all built on the zero trust principles. And you're absolutely spot on. Everybody is going to need to have to consider this. It's why you see companies like, as an example for Intel, looking at trusted domain extensions, being able to encrypt from the silicon, self-generate keys there, so that not only are the systems administrators for cloud providers unaware or can't see those keys, they become another level of encryption to protect from adversaries and adversary tampering. And you're exactly right, because look, in the days of old, when we had to do air-gapped systems, it cost a lot of money. We were built basically replicating systems like you would for disaster recovery sites on a high side, the low side, and everywhere in between. But to your point, Paul, this new federated architecture that's coming really has to make us rethink that enterprise architecture on how we do this to make sure we can deal with the classification at the software level, at the tip of the spear, at the edge, where all of this data is being collected and potentially, in some sort of multi-domain format, as you've described.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll even throw in another regulation that is coming fast and furious is the EU CRA, which is if you don't have that, I mean, the reporting has to be in place by September of 2026. All applications that are working across the EU have to be in compliance to by December of 2027. And there are some stiff penalties. I mean, like we're talking about jail time for CEOs that sign off on this. So it's incredibly important that zero trust control, identity segmentation, continuous monitoring, plus those AI specific hardening and logging are really now expected in acquisitions, ATOs, and real sustainment, right? Because that's really what has to happen with regards to these new operational environments. And again, we're talking to this audience and hoping the audience is being educated on some of the things that are coming that they may not be aware of or knowing, but there's some stiff penalties if these regulations are missed. But Cameron, let's kind of talk to operational AI at the edge. I mentioned the explosion of applications happening. There's some areas where agencies are resharpening, testing, evaluating, verification, and validating those AI kind of initiatives, putting these guidebooks or playbooks in place, putting frameworks in place. What are your thoughts around that? Is that going to be like the model moving forward, and are we going to use those as the new workflow moving forward?
Yeah, I really think it's the model for how government needs to look at the deployment. Paul, I had the great fortune of being mentored by a rear admiral in the Navy. And he always used to have an expression that he used to tell me. And he said, Cameron, it's never about Washington out to the foxhole. It's the foxhole back to Washington. So when you think of that in its truest form and applying it to real life, it's about the tip of the spear where the mission lives in the operational environment, exactly as you've talked about, and building with that use case in mind back to the policy and how policy is derived through Washington. And you really nailed this. When you start to think of how they're doing things at the edge, I mean, I'll give you an example. We're working with customers now that want to implement our software on something as small as a Raspberry Pi device because they're looking to do collect while driving around in vehicles with a very simple RF antenna just attached to the vehicle. Those things, to your point now, we've got to metadata tag that data at the edge. We have to classify it at the edge. So to your point, we comply with the requirements you mentioned earlier from a policy perspective, but then you've got to be able to transmit that information to the broader part of the enterprise, whether it's cloud or a private sovereign on-prem cloud of some type, to be able to deal with those types of compliance issues. And they're real issues. And what's changed between today and yesterday, Paul, it's an imperative now, right? You cannot delay modernization. We can no longer kick the can down the road because all of our near-peer competitors have caught up and they're about to surpass us. So this race has just gotten faster. So people need to feel the urgency for modernization in this aspect.
Yeah, Cameron, I agree. I think that one thing that I was thinking about in my response to you was I almost said that programs need to consider. And I want to retake that and say programs, really must, they prove reliability, robustness, operational sustainability, and suitability. It's not just about model accuracy. It's about real world contested conditions. And That is really what's happening here. Cameron, this has been great. We talk a lot, and there's a lot. And I hope the audience head's not spinning here because it's a lot to think about. What would you advise the audience where to go to learn more about what we talked about here on the session today?
Yeah, Paul, look, your best advocates are your industry experts like yourself, people like myself who've worked across a variety of different industries and just want the best for mission outcome and mission capability. Get involved with great organizations like FCA, INSA, ones that help drive these further educational initiatives in these spaces, and really talk to the vendor community. Talk to the vendor community and understand exactly what's going on. And look, you have to take some of it with a grain of salt. You have people who take legacy mindset. You have to look at that. And then you've got innovators and disruptors. And Silicon Valley is producing some amazing technology today that is disrupting this entire narrative to be able to help us bring these things into a very safe operational environment. So constantly seek the industry experts, Paul, like yourself and others that are helping us drive these great topics into the mainstream, because that's the first and foremost. You being a voice for us in industry the value of that's immeasurable. So you have to start there, but then begin to leverage the resources that industry provides here, because this is a fast-moving game.
Cameron, thank you. This has been very insightful. There's a lot to consider here to the audience. Take Cameron up on the offer of reaching out to him and the MinIO team. Really, thank you, Cameron, for joining us today. And a big thank you to all of you that's tuned in. We really appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But that wraps up this episode, but we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talents shaping the future of application development. Whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social. If you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect, you can always reach me at paulan@siliconangle.com. Until next time, stay curious and stay building. Thank you.